From the unexplained to the mundane, come join us on a journey to the fringe. Hello and welcome to Journey to the Fringe. And Chelsea, I don't really have an opener. It's more an aside that we need to go over right now. I think it is only due to societal pressures that we pronounce it dandelions and not dandelions. And I can't get it out of my head, and I just need that to be known to people.
There's so many things that could be pronounced in a different way that... Could you imagine, though, if you're just talking to someone and they were like dandelions?
Yeah, somebody who had only read the word and like, look at those beautiful dandelions.
In a social setting, and like, I think I would ponder it for a minute before he's like, okay, was he trying to say dandelion?
Yeah, I don't know if I hadn't have thought of that. If somebody said that, I would fully assume they're talking about dandelions at that point. But it sounds flowery, that name, does it not? Like, it sounds like it's how it actually should be, but for societal pressures.
There ought to be a day where you just pronounce things weird.
Try pronouncing things new.
What would you call that
day? It needs
day?
to be there.
Alternate pronunciation day. The funnest day on the earth.
I am so excited to go pray to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, personally.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we are your podcast hosts, Taylor and Chelsea. Here today, probably covering a two-parter in what may or may not be two connected stories. It's weird to explain starting out here, but once we go through the entire story, it's going to make more sense.
Okay, I'm really curious what this is about.
We are talking about the UFO hotbed, Gulf Breeze, Florida. Have you ever heard any stories about Gulf Breeze?
Did you just forget where it was?
I needed to look at the date of my script to make sure I got it right.
No, I haven't. Maybe I have, though. Maybe I have. I need more information at this point.
Well, weirdly enough, I bought secondhand, I think this was like 4 years ago, at a used bookstore, a book called The Gulf Breeze Incident.
Oh, wait, I think I have heard this. But vaguely, I can't think of anything.
It's written by an Edward Walters, who we're going to be talking a lot about in this episode. I'm actually glad if you haven't heard about this one. This is a really fun story that takes some twists and turns that we're going to go through and just learn like why Gulf Breeze is significant in the UFO community.
I always love a good twist and a turn, and potentially an asshole to look into at a later date.
This is where we're looking into him. We'll learn about him.
Okay, good. I would hope so.
Okay, good. Well, strap yourselves in. For some reason, our seats as podcasters do have seat belts.
Yeah.
You as podcaster listeners, I don't think they're mandatory, but you should just invest in some good seat belts for your seats. Because
you probably should, because mine's done up.
We told you so many times to do it.
I know, and you wouldn't believe how many times the seatbelt has come in handy while we've been recording.
Well, and you gotta admit, you guys look really awkward when I say strap yourselves in and you guys do the like fastening your seatbelt motion like you're on a plane and just look like a fool in public because you don't have that seatbelt with you. You would look so much better if you had the seatbelt.
It's true, just to do it up while everyone was watching you pretend to do it up.
Judging you with those eyes.
We know the eyes.
Anyhow, Chelsea, our story starts in the 80s, specifically on November 11th, 1987, when a building contractor by the name of Edward Walters is working late at his home when he notices a strange light outside his property. Intrigued, he made his way to the window to see what the source of the glow might be.
What was it?
A glowing object hovering in the sky, although his view was partially obscured by a tree outside his house. Wanting to get a better view, Walters immediately ventures outside.
Good choice.
He makes a lot of good choices actually as we get going here.
I love that for him.
As soon as he stepped outside, he realized he was viewing something out of the ordinary. He would later describe the object, quote, top-shaped craft, which I think he means like a spinning top, end quote.
Okay.
Sorry, I need to end the quote differently there, but you guys all get what I was trying to do.
They're strapped in, of course they do.
Yes. This is why you have the straps. The top had a circle of bright lights on the underside. Around the edges were what appeared to be dark square windows that were separated by portals, as he called them. Upon coming to his senses, he sees it, he's like, whoa, and he's like, wait, I clearly need a camera. So he goes and gets his Polaroid camera, grabs it, comes back outside, and he snaps several photos of this phenomenon from his front yard. Wanting to get a better view, He left his front yard, steps out onto the street, heads closer to the UFO, and takes several more photos as he does this. A moment later, the object headed in his direction and then hovered directly over where he was standing, and he took 5 Polaroids of the object in the sky outside his home. Walters reported seeing the object hover about 200 feet above the ground, describing it as being, quote, right out of a Spielberg movie, end quote. As he looked at the craft, a sudden bright blue beam of light came from its underside and struck him. He said the force of the light was so strong that he was even lifted several feet from the ground. He later described the moment to a local newspaper, stating that as soon as the light hit him, he was unable to move his arms and that his entire body appeared blue. He further recalled that he was, quote, trying to breathe, but my chest wouldn't expand, end quote. At the same time, a voice appeared in his head stating that he should not worry and that, quote, we will not harm you, end quote. Despite these assurances, Walter screamed to be put down. He also recalled a, quote, piercing smell, a little scent of ammonia mixed with heavy cinnamon.
We've heard cinnamon before.
I don't know where. I don't really remember that.
You don't?
No. End quote. And this scent, quote, scorched and then stuck to, end quote, the back of his throat. Things then turned even more bizarre as he began seeing pictures and images of dogs in his head, further describing this as if he was turning pages in a book in his mind while humming sounds began resonating in his head. The next memory he had was waking up on the ground. He looked up and around him and the strange craft was now nowhere to be seen. Dazed and perplexed at what had transpired, Walters returned to his house with his camera. November 17th of the same year, Ed goes and contacts the local newspaper, the Gulf Breeze Sentinel. He met with an editor and told him of events occurring 6 nights earlier, as well as presenting this photographic evidence. However, Ed did so under the guise of having been given the photos by somebody else named Mr. X and remained anonymous during this time.
That seems like an odd thing to do.
However, days and weeks go by and he would eventually he claims further sightings and eventually admits that he was the anonymous friend who was the witness to these bizarre happenings. So November 11th, the first sighting, November 17th, when he goes and talks to the newspaper. On the evening of November 20th, Walters claimed to suddenly be able to hear voices coming from somewhere, as well as a hum that filled his head during his initial encounter. He left what he was doing and made his way outside. Once there, he could see a glowing orb-like object that was descending. Then it stopped and hovered in place for several moments, allowing him to take, again, more photos of it. Several weeks later, at around 3:30 a.m. on December 2nd, the family's pet dog awoke Walter from sleep with its sudden barking. Walters got out of bed, headed to the French doors where the dog had its focus, and Walters opened the blinds and was beyond shocked to see a strange figure standing directly outside looking at him. He described the creature as being around 4 feet tall with particularly large head and black eyes. Walters claims that he was surprised at the sight, that he momentarily fell to the ground in shock after the two locked stares for several moments and the strange figure turned around and began to walk away. At this point, Walters opens the door, began to pursue the creature, and after taking only a few steps, the bright blue beam of light rapidly descended from above and instantly paralyzed him. He looked on as the small figure headed off into the field and disappeared from sight.
I'm finding a couple things interesting already.
Don't worry, there's more to the story. There will be more interesting things.
Okay.
A moment later, the blue beam retracted and he could move once more. Already with his camera in hand, he took a picture of the object, now hovering over the field where the creature went headed, shooting a blue beam down to the ground. Walter stated that it was his belief that this second beam was, quote, picking up the creature, end quote, that had been outside the house. 2 nights later, in early hours of December 5th,
Holy Jesus.
Ed awoke in the middle of the night and witnessed objects hovering over the high school that was near Walter's home. After several moments, the object descended, although Ed could not tell if it hovered just above the ground or it actually landed. In total, over this time period, Chelsea, from November 11th to December 5th, he took 32 photos and 1 video recording of the object over these sightings.
It's funny, if I Google it, only like 3 or 4 come up, actually.
They're actually all in the book, funny enough.
I mean, that's probably a red flag.
Don't worry, there will be time for red flags when we get to red flags, Chelsea.
Oh,
right now,
they're
it's
just
stories.
a flying. They're just a flying out right now.
Okay.
But I'm keeping my mouth shut so far.
By this time, not only had many in the local community heard about Walter's claims, but so did MUFON, who contacted Ed in order to conduct an investigation into these enigmatic events.
Oh, man.
So MUFON gets involved here, and after examining the photographs and listening to the details that Ed accounts, they are largely impressed and even describe it as, quote, one of the most incredible cases in modern UFO history, end quote. They had even provided Walters with specialized cameras and equipment so that he could capture clear images should he have any further encounters.
What?
Yeah, they gave him like state-of-the-art stuff. They're like, you seem to be a hotspot, so let's just get you equipped.
Okay, and I just want to say this is definitely the time frame that Bill Moore is involved in MUFON. I just want to...
That is going to come up later. You just leave it to that.
Okay. I love that for this story.
Investigators also began to collect other sightings from Gulf Breeze and nearby residents. So it's not just him seeing this.
Oh.
One of these events even occurred on the same day as Walter's initial sighting on November 11th, several hours earlier at 4:30 a.m. Arthur Huford claimed that on the afternoon in question, he and his wife witnessed an object that looked exactly like the one photographed by Walters, hovering over trees in Pensacola.
Interesting.
In an article of Huford's report, Jackie Brooks wrote in the New Journal that he was a, quote, quiet, sober, involved, intelligent, unquote, man, and someone, quote, you would trust to tell the truth, end quote. In the same article, she also highlighted a similar sighting by Dr. Fenner McConnell, describing him as a, quote, well-respected man of the community, and someone known for extreme views or exotic notions. I feel like that's wrong, but I'm going to keep going with it.
Okay.
I have to assume they mean not known for extreme views or exotic notions, but that's not what it says.
I always wonder if I was to ever see a UFO, like how people would describe me as either being credible or not.
Are people still respected in communities anymore? That's my one question.
Yeah. Maybe, like, community might be used loosely.
I feel like it's just not hated within the community nowadays. Because I feel like that's the only reputation you get anymore. What with society killing the idea of community.
That's true, but you would have to ask people directly. Because if you ask people on social media, like, everyone would hate you, I think. Because you get behind a screen and then people feel a lot looser to give their full opinions.
I mean, it really depends on what you mean by social media. If it's Blue Sky, they might say good things. If it's Twitter, whatever they call it now these days, there might be a few N-words and other things thrown around.
Yeah, so. I've seen people's opinions, and sometimes I think there's a little bit too much leeway given. Well, not leeway, just ability now that people shouldn't have. It's too easy to give their opinion.
Anyhow, not known for his extreme views or exotic notions, and like Huford, his accounts were corroborated by his wife. So these seem to line up, and MUFON is pumped that they have this kind of sighting going on with multiple times over the course of months and photographic evidence from each time it happens. Like, super pumped. But as they get going, a few holes start to show up.
Oh no.
Many, even in the UFO community, were far from convinced from Walter's credibility, just one of whom was the Center for UFO Studies. One of the main refutes against Walters is that he intentionally produced the photographs using double exposure techniques and a toy model. Which, Chelsea, I don't know if you know what double exposure is. It's basically when you take one picture and then take another picture on top of it.
Oh, okay.
Which makes it look like something completely different.
Yeah.
But, you know, with a Polaroid, it's hard to do that.
Is it?
Yeah, because the photo comes out once you do it.
Yeah, but then you just take another Polaroid of that photo.
That's not quite how that works. It's because the film gets exposed, you can re-expose the film to another shot, and it'll have an underprint of the first photo in it.
Oh, okay.
Do you understand that?
Yeah.
It's basically how ghosts kind of show up on some pictures, is because there was a negative already on there that when it took the photo, and it gets a little blurry because of it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's actually, it can explain away some of the ghost photos out there.
I've actually never heard that theory put forth before.
Oh, okay.
Which is super interesting.
And the veracity of these claims appeared even more certain when ufologist Zan Overall seemingly discovered that Walters did indeed have the knowledge knowledge of how to do double exposure techniques and the capability to utilize them. Even those who did not accuse Walters of perpetrating a hoax were not as convinced of the photograph's authenticity. The National Enquirer asked a photo expert with NASA, Dr. Robert Nathan, to analyze the pictures as they were interested in running a story on Walters' accounts. Ultimately, however, he stated his findings were inconclusive and so couldn't say with certainty that they weren't fake. There were also details that came to light, such as Walters reportedly paying a fee to Dr. Bruce McCabe in order to write a chapter in a potential book he had been given a six-figure advance for that he was to call UFOs Proof Positive. A little weird thing there.
Just a little weird thing.
However, when the publisher had the photographs analyzed, they received a similar report that was given by Dr. Robert Nathan and ultimately had the title of the book changed to The Gulf Breeze Sightings.
Interesting.
We should also note that during this time, Walters' wife and family stood by his accounts. Furthermore, in February of '88, Walters passed 2 polygraph tests regarding his claims. Now, despite the skeptics, however, further sightings of the bizarre object hovering and moving over the region continued to unfold, with Walters himself recording several more apparent close encounters. Indeed, although he began by giving his information under the guise of a go-between, he quickly became a celebrity in the state of Florida, even appearing on several television shows that wished to examine his apparent evidence of visitation. With all of this fame and fortune, he moved out of the house where most of the sightings had occurred, and he moved elsewhere in the region to an undisclosed location. And he specifically kind of says that he did this because he was getting too big in the UFO world and he wanted to kind of remain anonymous, not have people come visit him in his house.
Okay.
That property stood empty for close to a year, and when it was clear to the UFO adventure seekers that Walters had indeed gone for good, the house was finally bought by somebody named Robert Menzer. That name's going to come up again here soon.
Really? Okay.
Actually, immediately. I didn't realize it was immediately. I thought it was a little further down. Menzer moves in, and he says in the June 10th, 1990 edition of the Pensacola News Journal that he had ventured into the loft of the house in order to turn off water so he could install a new ice maker. And as he was moving insulation in the attic, he finds a model UFO.
No way.
Yeah. And he claims it.
Does this guy have both of his arms?
Robert Menzer or Ed Walters?
Ed Walters.
I assume so. Why?
Because this is getting a little suspicious, and I don't know. Billy Meyer would have never left the homeland.
Oh. Yeah, they don't speak enough German in Florida. He's not going
No,
there.
they really don't. No. Okay.
So Menzer says that the object was made of 2 foam plates and 2 slightly smaller foam plates with paper rings in between them, onto which windows had seemingly been drawn. Perhaps even more damaging, when the paper was removed, records of a house sale were discovered in handwriting that appeared to match that of Walters. In response to the find, Walters completely dismisses this, and he says, quote, "Only a fool would leave behind such a piece of evidence," end quote. Further stating that the model had clearly been quote-unquote planted in order to discredit both him and the many sightings he had experienced. He added that the house sale records were his papers and that they related to a house sale which fell through 2 years after his initial sightings in November of 1987. I don't really get the sale of the house papers thing, but whatever.
I think it's just tying it to him that they were found together.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
And they likely would have been his if it was found with papers of his.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. He stated that he often found people searching in his trash and that someone must have retrieved the house paperwork from there. In another twist, investigators eventually discovered that the plans did indeed match those of a housing project for 1989 that had fallen through. Walters stated the model Menzer had discovered was not at all like the crafts he had photographed. Although he stopped short of accusing Menzer of being behind the model, he heavily hinted at it. And we should note that Menzer only revealed the model's existence when a reporter arrived at the property in relation to the former owner.
That is hilarious.
He didn't actually go to the papers for it. This paper wanted to write a story about it. He's like, oh yeah, I found this.
Does this help your claim at all? If this guy had any brains, he would have been like, yeah, I was just trying to recreate the UFO that I saw.
I don't know. Like, if we know anything about how the world works now, it's either you deny or you don't even answer the question and you just completely respond to something else. Like, that's how the world works these days. And he didn't do a bad job with that.
Yeah.
Now, with those cases all that happening, Walters appears to kind of weather the storm, and his claims of the model being a plant are taken pretty well by actually the people who believe him. And then,
of course,
something else happens, Chelsea.
Oh, I'm so excited. What happens? What happens?
So the following week, June 17th, 1990 edition of the Pensacola News Journal, another article appears concerning Walters' UFO sightings. In it, a teenager by the name of Tom Smith claims that he had assisted Walters in making the UFO model just before the sightings began. He went on that Walters had first taken pictures of the model, which had been made to give the appearance of glowing, and then taken pictures of the night sky using the same frame on the film, which is what double exposure is. He even revealed that to make it appear that a UFO had landed in a nearby field, Walters had turned a trampoline upside down and then jumped on it over and over again in order to flatten the grass and vegetation in the shape of the round object. Smith continued that to begin with, he thought Walters was merely going to play a joke on family or friends. However, when he asked him to take the photographs to the newspaper as if he had taken them in order to make the story more believable, Smith realized that Walters was looking to dupe the media and public for financial gain. Not wanting to get caught in a fraud, not least as he didn't want to disappoint his family, Smith declined to further be involved. When Smith's parents were interviewed about their son's claims, they stated that what he was saying was true and that he had told them about the trickery before. And while they had urged him to come forward with the truth, he wished to stay out of the affair until now. So this was 3 years after the whole thing. And you gotta think about it, I don't know how old he was at that time, but 3 years for a teenager is a lot of time to grow up.
That's true. That's true.
But this story just keeps going, Chelsea. So providing further interesting backstory to the claims of the Smith family was the fact that Smith was running against Ed Walters for city council.
What?
The dad of the teenager who allegedly helped him do this is running against him for city council. Ed Walters apparently got involved in politics, and this is when it all comes out.
Oh my god. Of course he's getting involved in politics.
Yeah, he's got money, he's a celebrity.
Option.
Yeah. Coincidentally or not, around the same time their son came forward with the claims is when this all happened.
Oh.
So the Smith family could have some motive for saying this.
Yes. Yeah.
This, as we might imagine, led those who backed Walters' accounts as proven fact to accuse Tom Smith of not only lying, but of the Smith family being behind the plant of the model in the first place, so that they could then publicly humiliate Walters. But of course, Smith family denies this. Those who side with Walters turn their attention to the claims made by Smith. For example, landing spot that was examined and investigated did not grow vegetation for almost 18 months, so they say. And what's more, no chemicals or other agents were discovered that could have caused the lack of growth, in a perfect circle no less. This was something that certainly could not be produced by jumping on an upside down trampoline. There was also the details that Smith had given regarding how Walters achieved the blue beam of light shown in one of the pictures. He had claimed that Walters had peeled away ever so slightly the back of the film. This was something that those with knowledge of photography stated would not achieve such a result. Perhaps even more damaging for Smith's claim were that, as well as those who believed double exposure was the cause of the UFO in the photograph, is that no photographic expert could produce a double exposed photograph using the camera that Walters said he used, a Sun 600 Polaroid. Perhaps most damaging of all to Smith's claims was the fact that there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that Smith had ever met Walters before or after the sighting, which, I don't know. There's not a lot of paper evidence, even in this day and age, of any relationships people have with teenagers. That's just how it works, is it not? Unless you're related to them. So Smith offered in response to this that Ed had used Smith's camera to take the photographs and not the Polaroid, which he said. He even produced these fake UFO pictures and made them available to the media to prove how easily he could do it. And when these pictures were analyzed, no evidence whatsoever could be found to show that these were fake, meaning perhaps ironically, by their own standard, they had declared the pictures authentic images of UFOs.
What?
He's like, oh yeah, no, those didn't come from a Polaroid, they came from my camera, I can even show you how I did it. And he made more UFO photos, and they're like, yeah, these appear to be authentic. Basically, when they say authentic, they just mean they haven't been tampered with. Further turns in the already strange affair occur following Walter's self-publishing of the book, which I talked about before, that contained many of the photographs. As we might imagine, many people were eager to see the pictures close up for themselves, both believers and skeptics alike, and one picture in particular drew the attention of skeptics, as one where the UFO is just above a road. In this image, an apparent UFO is hovering and casts a reflection on the road below. However, this picture was examined by one particular photographic expert, and it was determined that the reflections were approximately 9 times larger than normal, suggesting that these reflections were not coming from the road, but were suspended in the air. Further analysis suggested that the reflections didn't match the bottom of the underside of the craft, and that the road appeared too bright to be a reflection from the object. Although it appeared that Walters had finally been exposed, some investigators pointed out that if the object had been at an angle while the photographs had been taken, this would explain the long shadows and discrepancy in them matching the craft's underside and the brightness of the road. Now, despite the counterclaims to the apparent exposures of Walters' photographs being fakes, it appeared, at least as far as MUFON was concerned, who really liked Walters at the time, that it was finally time for them to withdraw support.
Oh, thank God.
So after all of this happens, they finally go out, and in a statement regarding matter, they offer their belief in UFOs and that they had, quote, entered this investigation with a natural and favorable bias towards Walters' case, but our investigation and analysis lend to the conclusion that several, if not all of the photographs are probable hoaxes, end quote. But regardless of MUFON's position, the fact is that there were many more than just Ed Walters who also claimed to have seen UFOs in the Gulf Breeze region of Florida during the late 80s, early 90s. According to some sources, around 200 other people in the region made reports of similar objects to those allegedly reported photographed by Walters, with some of them even offering their own photographs. One resident, Bland Pugh, which is a terrible name, managed to capture a picture of an apparent alien craft in '93. This is an absolutely terrible picture, so don't even bother looking it up.
Okay.
Furthermore, in 1990, a group of witnesses and believers organized themselves into a loose organization that was dedicated to studying sightings as well as documenting any further encounters. And they would not be disappointed, observing and documenting several encounters, including one that is similar to the object to the one Walters claimed to have seen that had red lights on the underside. Although the concentration of sightings in Gulf Breeze began to slow as the 90s unfolded, reports of bizarre aerial crafts continue to come from that region, and it remains a location with more than its fair share of UFO activity. The surge of activity, however, at the end of the 80s into the early 90s arguably remains the region's most active years. In response to the Gulf Breeze sightings, MUFON ends up holding its first annual UFO symposium in nearby Pensacola, 1990, attracting hundreds of attendees. The conference continued for the remainder of the decade in this area, and the director of tourism for Gulf Breeze said that the free publicity attracted tourists and UFO sightseers. A local travel agent even said that she arranged 600 flights for the MUFON conference. Merchants began selling UFO-related goods in the area.
That's crazy.
It ends up being a big thing, and that is the year immediately after Bill Moore did his weird rant up at the MUFON symposium. So this was the one they followed that up with.
It's not looking good for MUFON at this time.
It's sure not. I should note, in 1993, somebody from News Journal revisited this named Curtis. The evidence against Walters' account mentioning a friend of the Walters family, Tommy Smith, had come forward admitting to, quote, witness Ed faking UFO pictures, end quote, as a practical joke. Curtis also reported that Walters and his wife had divorced in 92, and they had to split $2.5 million in assets that Curtis believed came from the hoax. So he got a ton of money from this entire thing and got a book deal out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right in and around the MUFON 1990 symposium in Gulf Breeze area, there's a group called the Gulf Breeze 6, and it is 6 people who went AWOL from the military and were posted in Germany, and they ended up getting arrested in an area at that time. And that's going to be part 2 of this story.
Oh, okay.
Whether or not it's related to any of this, we're going to see. I'm going to keep it vague at that point, but it's just so weird that this other thing ends up happening happening right around this and in Gulf Breeze. So I think this is a good place to end it. It is a wild story. And go ahead.
You already mentioned Bill Moore. I think we ought to throw MUFON on the future episode list.
At this point, it's not a bad idea. I think between the 80s and the 90s, they have a ton of baggage that I've never heard addressed.
Yeah. My other thing that immediately I went to when I was like red flags everywhere was the being that he saw on his front door, which I believe was described as a gray.
Yeah.
Guess when Communion came out?
Oh man, is it 87?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
February 1987, and this, I believe you said, was November 87, which was a wildly popular time for grays. If you've ever heard the story of Communion and the cover of Communion, that was my other thing that I immediately went to.
I just want to add this too at this point when we're talking about the Greys. Thank you for bringing that up because they made me remember. That totally reminded me of the Stanley Tiger story.
I know, that was the other thing. I'm glad you said that. It is almost exactly like...
Technology was too good for Stanley Tiger, so it became very obvious.
It reminds me exactly of the Stanley Tiger story.
This guy that just happens to be constantly surrounded by UFOs.
Just getting like the best footage of Stanley Tigers is so good with the Greys in his house. But yes, thank you for following my own train of thought that I forgot, because that was my other thing. It sounds exactly like Stanley Tiger. Bill Moore being in MUFON in and around the same time, which it doesn't seem like he's like talking about this, but maybe they needed this to kind of distract from the mess that Bill Moore made.
To be fair, Bill Moore was too busy with his own drama going on at this time to really address this.
And it being very close to, and he got it. I mean, most people will be like, I don't want to make money off of this. You don't see me getting rich, but this guy got
he already
rich.
had a book deal. He already had a book deal, like right as it's going on.
Yeah, so just those are just all the things that I noticed about the story.
So yeah, every now and then you might hear about the Gulf Breeze incident. This is literally it. Oh, and I forgot to mention too, there is a fairly large Air Force base very close to Gulf Breeze, which does somewhat explain the sightings. And in fact,
I guess so.
People did go talk to the base as well and say like, hey, was there anything weird on your radar these nights? And they said, no, nothing weird was on our radar any of the nights that...
As a matter of fact, yes.
And Walter saw it.
Yeah.
So.
Because we always hear that come up with these UFO stories, that the military just comes clean about the secret shit that they're testing.
Don't worry about it, is what they say.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Who's asking?
Yeah. We're definitely not going to have Richard Doty be in contact. Okay, good story. I love a good Stanley Tiger story.
The next one is even more bizarre, but it's going to be the second part because we are like roughly at the right time for an episode. And I think the other one's going to be just as long.
Fantastic.
So we'll leave it here. I have been Taylor, here with Chelsea. We are Journey to the Fringe. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Journey to the Fringe. If you have liked what you have listened to, please like, share, subscribe, or follow, depending on what venue you are listening to us through. Also, please, if possible, leave a 5-star review, as that really helps us in the algorithms. Should you wish to interact with us, please check us out on your social media of choice. I bet you we are there. And if you really want to communicate with us and give us ideas for new episodes, or tell us that we're wrong and terrible, either way, please send us an email at journeytothefringe@gmail.com. For now, I'll see you in the next episode.